On May 14, 2018, the Supreme Court overturned the Professional and Amateur Sports Protection Act, which had limited sports betting to only 4 states, allowing gambling to be legalized in every state across the U.S. In just 6 years, gambling has been made legal in 38 states and D.C., with legalization laws pending in 6 more states. In 2023, it was estimated that Americans bet over $220 billion on sports through legal books. Legalized sports betting came with some expected opportunities: new tax revenues for states, diversified revenue streams for casinos and sportsbooks, and a way to keep people off of unregulated offshore gambling websites. However, it also came with an unexpected twist. Professional leagues, the same ones that had fought to keep the law in place and advocated for gambling to be made illegal, turned to gambling companies as new business partners. Major League Baseball, a league that has historically kept its distance from gambling due to scandals, lifetime bans, and game fixing, embraced sports betting like all the others. And as sports betting became the nation's new favorite pastime, it also became impossible for fans to escape. Today, sports betting has brought in new avenues of entertainment and profits for the league, and it's also brought in its share of issues and concerns over the integrity of players and the sport itself. As MLB takes a bet on this new partnership, how will it change to embrace sportsbooks? And is it gambling on baseball's future? The love story of gambling in baseball is a tale as old as time, and today it appears that these once enemies have finally turned to lovers. You may say, once betting was legalized, the league had no choice but to embrace it. After all, they had no control over sportsbooks and legal betting. And that's partially true. While MLB does not control the legalization of betting, it certainly has control over a number of other ways that they decided to integrate gambling into the sport. MLB doesn't make money directly from legal sports betting, since that would be a conflict of interest. Instead, it makes money in 2 ways. The first is game-related revenue, where sportsbooks pay the league to be official sponsors, for advertising, and for the rights to league data and licensing. The second is what the American Gambling Association, or AGA, calls increased fan engagement, which for MLB means things like media rights, sponsorships, merchandise and ticket sales, all the things that come when your fans are paying much closer attention. In 2018, the AGA estimated that for MLB, the total additional revenue from gambling would reach $1.1 billion, and with the increase in gambling that's happened in the last 6 years, we can only imagine what that number might look like now. The majority of the $1.1 billion comes directly from that fan engagement piece, as gambling fuels fan participation by adding a new level of entertainment. But to be entertained, fans have to know it was out there, and so MLB makes sure fans know. Money lines are discussed during daily network recaps, and win probabilities are shown on broadcast. Ballparks everywhere are full of advertising for sportsbooks. Certain ballparks even include on-site sportsbooks, just in case your phone isn't enough. And MLB has had its own official sportsbook partner. Though MLB made sure to place rules that limit the number of gambling advertisements, both in person and on broadcast, that can appear during a game, and they also prohibit jumbotrons from showing odds, how well they follow their own rules is up for debate. In the eyes of the league so far, these integrations have been a way to thread the needle between providing more entertainment to fans while also protecting the integrity of baseball. But if they really wanted to keep the sport pure, they knew they'd have to bring fans into the world of betting while fencing out another very important part of the game: the players. Major League Baseball is an organization made up of around 1,000 players spread out over 30 teams. But that's not everyone. There are also around 70 umpires, 5,500 minor league players, and thousands of other MLB employees that all have to adhere to MLB's betting policies. In order to make sure that everyone's following the rules, MLB has created a full-time sports betting and compliance group. That team works with regulators across the country and with sportsbooks contracted with MLB. Together, they analyze gambling data for suspicious activity. Sportsbooks themselves won't flag players or employees as they make bets, but working with MLB, they can cross-check league rosters against their customers to see if any of the athletes have bet on baseball. Of course, it's not always as simple as checking a player roster against customer names, as players, coaches, and staff can often find ways to get around betting under their own names. To help provide an extra level of protection against violations, a new industry has formed: the Integrity Monitoring Services. Historically, MLB has partnered with Sportradar and US Integrity, now IC360 after a recent merger with Odds On Compliance, another integrity services firm, to help with their third-party gambling monitoring. These monitoring services use a myriad of tools to detect suspicious gambling activity and flag it for the league. For example, anytime you log into your betting app, your location is pinpointed for integrity analysts to monitor. According to Matt Halt, founder and CEO of US Integrity, they can pinpoint locations up to a 3-foot radius. They also monitor trends for any variations in gambling behavior, both on a mass scale and for individuals. These programs will detect suspicious activity that show any deviation from normal behavior and alert leagues. And while dollar amounts may seem like the most obvious deviation, Matt Holt says it's almost never that. It's usually maybe someone who used to bet $50 on a game of baseball or football who now wants to bet $25,000 on tennis or MMA. A shining example of this in action was the recent scandal from Alabama baseball, where suspicious gambling activity was flagged for several reasons and action was taken. You might hear all this and think the system works really well, and that depends on how you look at it. In 2022, Sportradar detected 1,212 suspicious matches of the 850,000 they monitored across 12 sports. That was a 34% increase to the year prior and a new record number. Sportradar claims that over 99% of matches are free from fixing, and presumably any suspicious matches are being flagged by Integrity Monitoring Service just like them. But it seems that integrity might be in question even when it comes to integrity services. I can see there's an inherent conflict of interest in that we're asking them to help monitor the integrity and they're making money from the sportsbook, said Kenny Gersh, MLB's Executive Vice President for Media and Business Development, in an interview with the Associated Press. And that's part of it. But John Holden, an Oklahoma State associate professor and PhD in sports law and corruption of sport, noted another conflict. My biggest issue with the integrity monitoring industry is that they work for the leagues. That's who pays their bills and that's who they work for. Their job is not necessarily to work for the public. And working for the sportsbooks and the leagues is a very lucrative place to be, with some integrity monitoring companies making over $200 million in 2021. With so much time, energy, and money spent on maintaining the perception of the league's integrity, one has to ask, is it working? If you ask most baseball fans about gambling scandals in the league, they'd probably mention the 1919 Black Sox or the 1989 Pete Rose scandal, both of which led to controversial lifetime bans. The lifetime ban is a holdover from the 1919 World Series, when owners came together to try to make the sport legitimate after a World Series game-fixing scandal. Owners then understood that if the integrity of baseball stayed cloudy, they would lose fans, and they did everything they could to prevent that, including losing one of the best players this sport has ever seen. That stance on how gambling could affect fan perception of the sport's integrity stayed consistent through 2019, when while gambling on other sports was allowed for players and employees, gambling on softball was still banned. According to one MLB VP, that conservative stance was there for a very good reason. It's just one of these things where even the implication from a public perception that this person is betting on a diamond sport per se is something that we don't want. You're a professional player. You should be able to control yourself and not bet on a diamond sport, said Casey Brett, a senior VP for MLB, to CBS Sports. It seems like it's a slippery slope towards betting on something that you might be able to manipulate or have inside information on, and it's not even worth it from an integrity perspective. That conservative stance has gotten a little lenient, as now betting on softball is allowed. That's not the only MLB policy that's changed either. In 2022, the league allowed players to become ambassadors for gambling companies, which means they could appear in advertisements for betting brands, a complete reversal from the 1980s, when Willie Mays and Mickey Mantle were banned from baseball for taking jobs with casinos, completely unrelated to sports betting. This harsh stance on gambling from a bygone time is probably why so many fans think league punishments for baseball are so much worse than they really are. So what are they? Today, players, umpires, and league employees can gamble on anything not related to baseball. That means amateur games like college baseball, home run derbies, all-star games, and fantasy baseball is not allowed, but everything else is fair game. Unlike some sports, there's no limit to where players can be when they're placing bets, but it does have to be done through a legal sportsbook. So what happens if someone is caught not following the rules? It depends. A bet on a baseball game that the player cannot affect gets him a 1-year suspension. If a player bets on a game he's in or on his own team, that's a lifetime ban. If the player places a bet with an illegal bookmaker, it's up to the commissioner to decide the punishment, though I imagine the FBI might have something to say before Manfred can get the chance. MLB's stance on gambling isn't the only noticeable difference of recent years. While you'd be hard-pressed to name a high-profile gambling scandal between 1919 and 1989, the 2024 season has barely gone a month without one. By now we all know, the season opened with a scandal surrounding Shohei Ohtani and his interpreter Ippei Mizuhara. At this point, it's believed that Mizuhara placed the bets without Ohtani's knowledge, and that he bet on sports that were not baseball. Ironically, had he been in a state where gambling was legal and placed them through one of MLB's partners, he would have been just fine. But he placed those bets through an illegal bookie, leading him to be fired from the Dodgers and arrested by the FBI. MLB later opened an investigation for David Fletcher, a current Braves minor league player and Ohtani's former Angels teammate, for also placing bets with the same illegal bookie. None of those bets were allegedly on baseball. Recently, Tucupita Marcano, infielder on the San Diego Padres, has been banned from the league for betting on baseball while he was on the Pirates. According to MLB's investigation, Marcano bet more than $150,000 on baseball almost 400 times, most of which included bets on whether his own team would win or lose. Marcano did not play in those games as he was injured at the time, and he denies having insider information, which would somewhat make sense as he only won 4.3% of his bets. But Marcano wasn't alone. Oakland A's reliever Michael Kelly and minor league players Jay Groom, Jose Rodriguez, and Andrew Saalfrank are all under a 1-year suspension for betting on MLB games unrelated to them or their teams. And most recently, at the time of writing, Pat Hoberg, the umpire famous for his perfect game in Game 2 of the 2022 World Series, is also under investigation for violating gambling rules. According to ESPN, the nature of this discipline is unknown, but Hoberg has not umpired a game this season, and he is currently appealing the decision. It seems that, no matter what the league, sportsbooks, and integrity service companies may be doing to catch gambling that violates league policies, the violations are coming in fast and furious, which has some fans concerned about the future integrity of the sport. In an interview with Associated Press, Declan Hill, a professor at the University of New Haven who consults for Interpol and pioneered their first online anti-match fixing education course, said, "Sports leagues depend on the credibility of their product. So once that credibility starts to get doubted by a section of your fans, you're on a slow path to death." So where does baseball stand on this path? In order to protect the integrity of baseball, MLB might have to place all their bets on the sport. One potential solution would be to ban prop betting as a way to cut down on incentives for players to cheat. With prop bets, fans can wager on specific actions from a player, like whether he makes a catch in the game, gets a certain number of hits, or even if he walks or strikes out. Recently, the NCAA started conversations around removing prop bets, citing the protection of the integrity of their sports as one of their main reasons. The league may also have to consider pulling back on some of the promotion of gambling that it's made to fans. Right now, there's a bit of a mixed messaging happening in ballparks across America. In their locker rooms, players see a sign that tells them not to bet on baseball. In the stadium and on TV, fans are told it's the best way to get involved in the game. Players notice, fans notice, and the more scandals come to light, the more noticeable this mixed message is. But taking a step back from gambling promotion wouldn't just provide some breathing room between players and the sportsbooks, it might bring fans closer to the game. A study done in the UK followed male soccer fans aged 18 to 35 for 2 years to understand how sports betting affected their relationship to the game. It found that some young men could only watch matches if they had multiple bets going, and that most of their conversations revolved around their bets and not the sport itself. One participant was reported saying, "As much as I enjoy it, gambling has ruined the sport, because you can't watch it without thinking, I should put a $5 on the first goal. You can't just enjoy it for what it is." Though many fans may not agree with that participant, it's a sentiment similar to the one shared by NBA star Kyrie Irving earlier this year. "Gambling and sports betting has completely taken the purity and the fun away from the game at times," Irving said. "There's a difference between being a diehard fan and supporting your team and loving your team versus somebody that's betting on a parlay." And he's not wrong. Once gambling was legalized in 2018, the MLBPA began to voice concerns regarding player safety. They bargained for a new amendment to their collective bargaining agreement, prohibiting fans from bet-related abusive speech against players, umpires, employees, or their families. They also created a safety hotline for players to report threats to them or their families, including on social media, and restricted player-specific betting information to be displayed in stadium before or during the games. But it's tough to say if those new policies have helped. USA Today reported that an MLB general manager received death threats directly delivered to his home, requiring police protection. Logan Allen, a pitcher for the Diamondbacks, was also reported saying that he'd been followed home once while playing for Cleveland by a fan upset that Allen's bad game had cost him all his money. In 2021, one fan pled guilty to threatening 4 Tampa Bay Rays after they lost to the Chicago White Sox. His DMs were so foul, I cannot show them to you on screen. This fan also threatened players in Atlanta, San Diego, Oakland, Cleveland, Baltimore, Kansas City, and Toronto before being sentenced to 3 years probation and 6 months house arrest. While those cases are on the extreme end, gambling issues are not as uncommon as you may think. According to the National Council on Problem Gambling, the country's percentage of sports bettors has jumped from roughly 15% to 25% since the Supreme Court ruling. The council also reports that the risk of gambling disorder has grown by 30%, and that calls to gambling crisis hotlines are climbing. Regardless of anyone's thoughts on gambling, it's here and it won't be going anywhere anytime soon. And while the increase in revenue and fan engagement may make it seem like an overall win, the devil's in the details, and they're not always pretty. The league may feel that in many ways they've done the best they can, but experts agree. As gambling becomes more and more popular, you can and should expect more and more scandals. And eventually, we'll have a scandal that can mar baseball forever. In 1919, a hard zero-tolerance gambling policy combined with the power of Babe Ruth saved the sport and its integrity. In 2024, gambling policies are ever-changing, and the closest we have to the Babe is caught up in his own gambling scandal. It's time to make changes now, before it's too late. Thank you so much for watching this video. Feel free to leave a comment below telling us your thoughts on gambling and how it'll affect MLB in the long term. Also, make sure to check out our other extra inning videos where we do deep dives on baseball and history. If you like this and you want to see more, make sure to like the video and subscribe. It really helps the channel, and we appreciate you being here.